So hello today, I'm Taki'h, and this is our interview with wisdom keepers of our sacred blood. I'm very, very happy today to be joined by DeAnna L'am, and she is a visionary. She has been working with this theme of our sacred blood for 3 decades all over the world. Her passion is about empowering women and girls to reclaim their cycles, reclaim the sacredness of their cycles. It's not just about the politics or the economics of it or the mundaneness of it. It's also about the spiritual aspect of it, and to love themselves as women who bleed and then who also stop bleeding.
Yes.
So the full cycle and what happens afterwards. So I'm very excited and very, very grateful because I am a newbie in this and I want to know all about it, and I don't want to reinvent the wheel. So I'm asking the wisdom keepers, the ones who have been working with this either through traditional paths or through just their passion and it's what they've dedicated their life to, like you, to tell us about it. And I want these conversations to be recorded, and I want the world to be able to hear them and come back to them. I don't want them to be missed. And so that's what this aspect of our Sacred Blood project is. I came to know about you through the global offering of blood offering that Jimena Chalchi in Mexico initiated with her team, which started on May 22nd, the new moon of Gemini. And it was exactly on that same day that I launched this project, although I didn't know about them. And
Wow.
like I had done a masterclass the night before, a 2-hour masterclass on blood mysteries, going from 0 to 100. And in the morning, I woke up with, okay, there's a global movement that's got to start. And then a month later, I came across their movement, and I was like, you're kidding. And there were thousands of women, thousands, I think like 8,500, 9,000 women and men, groups, mothers, grandmothers, daughters, who made their offering of their sacred blood that day. And so that blood was calling and it was vibrating in the land, and it reached me in Finland because most of the
Yes.
people were in the Americas and in Europe, in Spain. And yeah, so I feel like there's something calling us. So I want to know how you were called. And I know it's been now 3 decades or more, but I want to hear how you were called.
Thank you, first of all, for inviting me and for your passion and for being someone who is carrying the torch. Because when I think of how it was 3 decades ago, it was bleak. No one was saying the word menstruation, and it was completely outside of the norm. And to be here now and see the women that are rising to offer their blood to the earth, the women like you that are leading masterclasses and movements, it feels like someone who's thrown seeds to the wind 3 decades ago, and now I'm looking at a young forest. The trees are not very old yet, but they have taken roots, and I'm not alone anymore. And it feels such a gift and a blessing and an honor to have been part of that seeding. So thank you for continuing to grow. Yeah.
That's so
Yeah.
touching. That's so beautiful. And that's exactly what it feels like. It's like, okay, there's a set of basically women who
Yeah.
have been seeding and carrying the torch when it was taboo. I mean, it's still taboo, but it was like super taboo, and it was, as you said, bleak, or may have seemed like an uphill battle or something, but still carrying that torch. That menstrual blood is something normal, natural, and sacred for all of us. And now these generations, mine included, and younger ones, are following in your footsteps. And so, yeah, I know that you also started the movement of red tents in every neighborhood. And that's something very beautiful. I was reading about it recently and I got inspired that we're moving into the country, and I was like, I want to have a red tent on our land. So, yeah. So, yeah, could you tell us more about that whole process, that movement?
Yes, yes. First of all, it's not in my footsteps. There are others. I'm not alone in it. So I want to acknowledge Alyssa Starkweather and others that have been doing this for that long. Um, I don't know that I answered how I started. I started because I needed to heal myself, because everything was working in my life, and because once a month I became an emotional basket case. And I started looking into how the blood was held in indigenous cultures, because I couldn't believe for one moment that nature designed half of the human race to suffer every month. It just didn't compute. So I realized the sacredness with which it was held, and woman was held, and the womb and the cycle was held in all indigenous cultures around the world in millennia past. And I started honoring my cycle in the way that indigenous cultures did. And my symptoms started to lessen and lessen until they disappeared. So I started by doing the journey of healing and became the wounded healer, the one that healed herself and started offering this to other women. And you were asking about the Red Tent. So this was in the early 90s, 92, 93. And the Red Tent book was not yet written. So I called it Menstrual Empowerment, and my organization that still is thriving is Red Moon. So I was gathering women to talk about our blood and to look at reframing how we hold it and how much we've been conditioned by our cultures to hold it as a curse, as a taboo, as a negativity. So starting to shift that with other women, as I did for myself. And when the book, Red Tent book, Anita Diamant's book, came out and became pretty much overnight a bestseller and women around the world read it, I realized that it gave us a language. And I started using that language because with Red Moon, I had to explain a lot. And when I said Red Tent, women immediately knew, oh, that's where we sit when we bleed. That's where we gather together for our moon time. So it was a language component that was provided, a term that was coined, that provided an opening to shortcut the conversation and start from the middle of the conversation where we wanted to go, rather than explain the concept first. So last thing I would say in relation to your question is that the idea is that I thoroughly believe is that when we have a red tent in every neighborhood and village and town and country and state, the world would be a different place. When every girl grows up knowing that her mom goes to the red tent when she bleeds, and she, when she starts cycling, will go there as well, and she would birth her children there, and they would go there, the girls would go there. When we have that in place, we will have a complete different culture on earth.
So tell me, what would that culture be like? Just a little, taste of it. What would change from this simple, not so simple, but this significant but simple move?
Yes.
I mean, that's the big thing of our sacred blood, is that it's very simple, but it's so
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah.
If everybody could hold menstrual blood as in reverence, what different world we would live in. That's exactly it. So yeah, I want to hear it from you.
We will live in a world where cyclicity is as valued as linearity, and there is a partnership between the moon and the sun, between the cyclical ways of women and the solar ways of men. We will live in a world where girls would grow up proud to be women, anticipating the time that the moon would start pulsing in their body, knowing that their older sisters and their cousins and their girlfriends have gone to the red tent, and one day their time will come, their turn will arrive, knowing that their mothers go there to replenish and renew, and that they are revered by their culture because they need to replenish and renew themselves when they bleed so that they can start another cycle. And one day it would be their turn as well. It would be a world where women would love themselves and their bodies and their rhythms and be proud to live them out loud. Wouldn't that be lovely?
It just sounds amazing. Like, and the first thing that I think of is like, that would just be resetting us to normal. Like,
Yes.
like that just should be standard. Like, how is that not
Yes.
normal?
Yeah.
That was
It's
my first
true.
reaction, actually.
Well, when I'm hearing you say that, it definitely shows how far from normal we strayed, how far from balance. Maybe we use the word balance rather than normal, but how far from balance we strayed, how imbalanced we are, and how natural would it be to be balanced again.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. Yeah, we would bring back to balance the feminine and the masculine, and the reverence for spirit and matter.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, in our bodies and their
Yeah.
functions and creation.
Yeah,
I'm
and
actually, yeah, go ahead. Please go ahead.
the realization of the yin yang symbol of that spirit is part of matter, and matter contains spirit, and spirit contains matter, that they are like the yin and yang symbol, that they're not divorced, but they are a whole, and one is contained within the other.
So every time you speak, I want to have a follow-up question, but I'm still back one. So now I have two.
Okay, let's go back.
So okay, there are many people who bleed, who feel like I'm a wreck, or this is torture, or this is a curse, or this is suffering, or this is a burden, or like, can't we get this over and done with, or can these pills now you can take, which basically stop your bleeding, or the IUD, which also sometimes does that. So there are many who can associate with how you felt at the beginning of your journey. And then you said you investigated the indigenous ways, and you started following those, and you came out the other side of it, obviously, very empowered. So what were some of the things that you did, that you changed in your way of being, concretely, whether that's at the physical, emotional, energetic, whatever levels, that would help some of those who are watching, who are like, yeah, that's me. How do I get there?
So there are a few components. One is the realization that we expand and contract, that our emotional body, as spirit, as well as our emotional body, our spiritual sheath, is needing to expand and contract, that this is the breath of the universe. We have night and day, we have summer and winter, we have expansion, contraction. We as women live that breathing in, breathing out every month. And we live in a culture that's only breathing out, that's only go, 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 light, 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 the darkness, the incorporating into ourselves, the renewal is not revered, it's not honored, it's not acceptable. So we push ourselves to go. And one of the things that I started doing is, and that's in the model of the moon lodges and moon hats, is to take time off when I bled. That immediately reduced my irritability to zero, because when I closed my door and I wasn't in with my husband all the time, there was no one to be irritable with. Rather than being in each other's faces, I realized that I need time, and I took it. That was one thing. And it sounds simple, but for women to do that, there is a huge amount of inner work on inner permission to take time and to organize their lives, and to have the support around them to do so. So we can go back to that. But the second thing that I realized that made a huge difference for me is that I realized that we as women lack the rite of passage, the coming of age ceremony that we did not receive when we became young women at menarche, at our first blood. And that this is a wound that we carry unknowingly. We've healed the inner child, we've healed we've become assertive as adult women, but the middle part, the adolescent, stayed invisible. And as girls, we are about to flower. We are a bud just before our first blood. And instead of allowing us to open up, the culture tramples on our bud and doesn't allow the flower to open. So it became my passion for myself and for my work with other women is to offer women the rite of passage they never had. And I believe it's never ever too late to have it, even if we're post-menopause, because the girl inside is still yearning and waiting and hoping to be welcomed, to be integrated, to be woven back into the tapestry of the woman that we became. So those are the components.
Yeah, that's beautiful, and that's absolutely true. It's never too late, because that imprint is, it doesn't matter how old you are in the physical body, the imprint is the imprint, and your system is ready for it at any point. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful. Um, I know I read, and this when I read it, I was sharing with you earlier that it really touched me. That one of the ways that you started was about bleeding, and bringing women's awareness to bleeding and consciousness to bleeding, was the bringing together sisters who, not biological sisters, women who were on, let's say, political other ends of the fence, other sides of the fence, the Palestinian and Hebrew Jewish border. And you were originally from, or spent most of your growing up years in Israel. And so when I read that, because that's also in another interview that I did with a wisdom keeper from Australia, that's how we closed. And so I felt like, oh, that's like, now you're the next interview. And so that she was saying that, we all bleed.
Yes.
That's what we have in common. We all bleed.
Yes.
And when you take it down to the most basic common denominator as women, economics aside, and culture and religion and politics and whatever, we all bleed.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to hear, because it was so touching to read, just that you did that work. I'd love to hear how that was, and yeah, whatever you want to share around that, because to bridge our differences through this singularity is an amazing thing. I think it has such treasures for us as a humanity.
Yes. Yes. So I left Israel. Before I left Israel, I worked at a school for peace called Neve Shalom Wahat al Salam, which is at the time was the only one. Now there is much more reconciliation work done. And I wasn't yet on the path of blood empowerment when I was in Israel, but on the path of reconciliation with Jews and Arabs, Jews and Palestinians. And we worked always co-ed, always men and women together. We never divided along gender lines. So fast forward, when I started doing this work in the early 90s, when I was living already in the United States, it became a passion and a desire to go back to Israel, to the School for Peace, and to work with the women, with the Jewish and Arab women. Because like you said, it is clear that we all bleed, whether we are Muslim or Jewish or Christian or Buddhist or atheist or Republican or Democrat or whatever belief or politics or anything divides us, our blood unites us. So it was very clear to me that I wanted to go back and give back to the women. So I traveled back to Israel in 99, just before the millennium. And we gathered women from many, many walks of lives. And the touching experience we all had was that when we started sharing blood stories and first blood menarche stories and speaking about our blood, there was no more religion or politics or divisions of any kind. It surpassed everything. Any perceived division was melted in the face of realizing that every story that was told, every woman could relate to. Maybe the details were different, but the emotions, the essence, the feeling was one. if women grew up in the city or in a village, in religious or atheist or that religion or the other religion. It didn't matter. It all paled to the fact that our connection was so evident, and it moved us all to tears.
Yeah, I'm moved to tears right now as you're speaking, and it's not my reality there what you're describing, but it is because I also bleed, and so it's like,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And to realize that this connection can bring peace. This is really how we can bring peace, because this is how we can bridge warring conflicts or any groups of people that are apart. If we bring the women together and we see our commonalities as women, this is how the bridges are made. This is how we can bring peace.
yeah, beautiful, beautiful story. Would you say, because I know you've worked in different countries, many different countries, and your books have been translated in many languages. How many languages?
The Diva's Guide to Getting Your Period is now in 9 languages, and the other one is only in 3. Becoming Peers, Mentoring Girls into Womanhood is in 3.
Okay, so yeah, that's still many. Especially, I know one of them is Spanish and one of them is English, so that
Yeah.
covers a lot of the world. um, yeah, as terms of population goes. So I'd love to hear from your experiences. What do you, as a wisdom keeper, what have you seen that is the same across these different cultures in what women are facing or have faced, or what their process is in overcoming, and what are some of the things that are quite different, or if there are any big differences that stand out, whatever, yeah,
Yeah,
stands out.
yeah. I would say that both the gift and the heartbreak is that there are no differences. It's a gift because we're all one, and it's a commonality that we can all revert to. The heartbreak is because how similar it is across the board in all countries I traveled to. The shame, the humiliation that many girls felt when they started bleeding from the culture, from their families, the fear, the stories of not knowing. There are stories in every country I went to. There was always a few women that thought as a girl that they were dying. They didn't know anything. So there isn't one culture that stood out where women were actually honored. Not at all. So that's why I'm saying it's heartbreaking, but it's also a beginning point. It's the bridge. That's the glue. So the similarities are in the fact that no one was welcomed, and that everyone was growing up with so much shame and embarrassment and discomfort and curse kind of energy related to their body, to something that is happening naturally to them every month for 40 years at least.
I sat with that reality the other month, since starting this project, and I was like, okay, I started bleeding when I was 9. Let's say I hit menopause around 50, whatever. Let's say around 40 years, give or take. Maybe 35 on the lower end, or maybe 45. It depends on menarche and menopause. But that's a long time. That's more than most people's half of their lifetime. Most people, like, that's at least half your life. Most in depends on the life expectancy, and but it's such a long time to feel this way.
Yeah, and such a recurring thing in a woman's life for 40 years, month after month. That's hundreds of periods. There is nothing that humanity does on that consistent of a basis that is so denied and rejected and tabooed. It's just insane.
Yeah, thank you for putting it that way. That is true. That's probably the only thing that's done so recurrently, so globally, for millennia.
Yeah.
Yes. So one of my deepest longings is that we finally get it, out of this being a privileged agenda, like Western women who of a certain social class, or white women, or priestesses, or this kind of thing, and that it's absolutely normalized. And I do truly believe that it will, at this point, we are ready, and it does require the involvement also of those in male bodies, of our brothers, our fathers, our partners, our coaches, teachers, who have such an impact on young girls and women as we grow. I've heard the stories, and I've benefited. Actually, in my case, I mean, my mother did talk to me about it, and she did her best. But the person who made me feel that I don't have to be ashamed of my blood was a lover that I had, a boyfriend that I had when I was a teenager, early on, who was okay with me bleeding and being intimate with me. And I was like, "Are you kidding? Are you not grossed out?" And he's like, "No." And never, and it's only through this project that I was reflecting on this, and never, ever since that moment of such utter acceptance and love, that he gave that to me. It was a gift. Of course, he didn't do that in that sense of giving me a gift, but it was such a gift that I've carried all my life, that no other imprint has been that could compare at that age than this boyfriend that I randomly had. And so I know that coaches and fathers and brothers and lovers and can have such an impact. And so I don't know, do you have a message for them also? Because I know some of them are listening and want to be supportive, and they also go through this same indoctrination, having lived in a womb for 9 months, being fed by this blood, and then they're all eeked about it, just like we are, and not only grossed out, but embarrassed, ashamed, like disgusted, like or like, this, I don't want to know anything about this. I don't. This doesn't have anything to do with me, kind of thing. So how to involve them, or what to say to them, if there's anything that comes?
So I would like to start with the men and the boys themselves, not in relation to women, but they also don't receive rites of passage. They also are not honored when they move from boy to man. And there is what's known as spermarchy. Are you know what spermarchy is?
I haven't heard about it, no.
So spermarchy is the equivalent to menarche. And menarche is our first blood as women. Spermarchy is the first wet dream that boys have. They all have the first one. They all invariably feel guilty and ashamed and don't know, and some think that they wet their bed. So there are similarities in the embarrassment and shame. And there aren't men around to say, hey, this happened to me as well. Let me walk you through this. Like there weren't women to talk to us about our first blood. So before we look at how men are relating to women, I invite men to reclaim their own shame and to transform that rite of passage for themselves. And from there, the journey is very close and quick and short to realize, oh, that's how women do their lives as well, and we can shift we always are wounded healers. We always heal. We're not here to heal someone else first. It's like they tell you on the airplane, put the mask on yourself first and then help the child. So yeah, we need to heal our own wounds and then help others. So I would start there, first of all. You're muted.
Yeah, I was just whispering to myself, beautiful. And it's so true, because there's 2 men who have submitted. One of them is my own partner, made a submission for this project, and they both said that through being able to see the blood as the menstrual blood as something sacred through their partner, they were able to then reflect back on their semen and lose the shame and see their semen as something sacred, to revere their semen. And that
Yeah.
it was, in reverse, because it wasn't with a male role model. But you're absolutely right. Of course, start at point zero, with
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Whoa.
That's where we start. And when that happens, and when we have men reclaiming their own adolescence, their own rite of passage, then absolutely you're right. Every man came from a womb. Every man on the planet came from a womb. And every man relates, whatever their sexual orientation is, they relate to women. They have their fathers, their brothers, their sons, their lovers, their co-workers, their friends to women. So I started doing, and it's very slow now, but I started doing red tents that are specifically to educate men. We still have red tents and always will have the sacredness of the red tent for women only. But once in a while, we have a red tent where men are welcome to be educated, to receive a window, to open a window into what does it mean to live a rhythmic life. Because part of what doesn't work and doesn't compute when men and women live together is that women don't understand first for themselves, and men don't understand about women, the cyclicity, the rhythm, the need to expand and contract. And when men get that, they can fully support and accommodate that. They just don't know.
This is absolutely true. They just don't know, but when they do, yes, it's been my experience also working with men on the feminine, and it's like a relief, like, oh, I can also be cyclical. I don't have to be just like this, and like, oh, that's just what's going on there. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Like now I
yeah,
get it, that I don't have to like worry or like try to figure it out. That's all. That
yeah,
it's okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's the women don't know either. They take pills, they take medications because they don't know either that there is a rhythm that they can be in harmony with. So the knowing and the education needs to always start within ourselves and then expand.
This is so exciting. I didn't know that anybody's working with inviting the men into red tents to educate them. This is so touching. I can't wait to set up our red tent and invite you over to Finland. Yes.
I travel where women and men are thirsty for this knowledge. So when travel opens,
Yeah.
I would be, let's plant the seed. I would be delighted.
I don't need to wait for travel to open. I have internet and I've got Zoom, and you are welcome to be
Okay.
on a big screen, and we can have our thing happening. I will not be limited by that. No, we will don't have to wait for that. That's well, but
We
I
are
do have to
not
build it.
limited. I love it.
No, 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 no. Just expand the realm of possibilities. That's all, and
Yes.
options. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, another question I have for you. One of the last ones. One of the saddest things that I have faced in this project is that when I've approached women who have already passed through menopause and have stopped bleeding for submission, and I've personally asked them, um, most of them have replied with, well, I'm not bleeding anymore. And that has really been very painful to me as a woman who's now 44, and I'm very much going towards that time of bringing closure to this reproductive age and of bleeding. And every time I bleed, it's like, yeah, I'm treasuring it because I know that I'm closer to that end. Um, I'm not taking it for granted,
Yes.
but this feeling of like, okay, I've hit menopause, and so now, or is the blood is not relevant to me. And I know you're working with women who are menopausal, and so and postmenopausal, and that being also rite of passage. And how do we still stay connected for those of us who are going to go, who are close to that, or whenever someone gets to that stage, we stay connected to our sacred blood, even though it's not coming through our physical womb anymore.
Yeah. So what my experience is for myself and women that I work with that are on the journey of menopause and beyond is that what we stay connected to is not the blood, but the rhythm. We are still lunar and we're still expanding and contracting. That when we start our first blood at menarche, we become cyclical and we stay cyclical for the rest of our lives until the last breath we take, whether our womb sheds its inner lining with the menstrual blood or not. So the connection is no longer to the blood substance itself, but it's to the moon, to the rhythm, to the cycle, which we still experience without bleeding. So in indigenous cultures, menopause is considered to be a time when a woman holds her blood and her magic within. So the blood does not spill, it's held. And my experience, again, learning from indigenous cultures, is that in the same way that indigenous cultures see the time of the blood when we cycle is a time when the veil between the worlds is thinnest. We have access to the divine at that time in a way that when we don't bleed, we don't have, the veil is not as thin. At menopause, the veil stays thin the whole month. That's it. We don't need to visit it once a month. We have done our visiting for 40 years, and we are in a state where the veil is thin. We need to be aware of it. We need to access it. We need to live it, because if we defy it as something, as menopause, as something negative, as the culture sees it, we're not able to access. But if we know, then we have accessibility to our intuition, to our guidance, to the womb wisdom of ourselves every day of the month when we are in menopause. So that's very exciting news. When I started being in my perimenopause years and my blood was skipping and being irregular, and I realized that I'm on the birth canal to birthing myself as a wise woman, that's when I started realizing that there is something that I'm looking forward to. Culturally, it's something that we push away and fear, but it's knowing that, having investigated that when I was in my perimenopause years, made it become something deliciously awaited. So I'm offering that to all women who bleed. There is a cherry at the top of this cake.
Yes, a red cherry.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a beautiful guidance for all of us, because we, assuming we live that long, we do cross this, also this rite of passage and this birth canal. One of my teachers said that there's 2 times in a woman's life that she really faces whatever hasn't been lived. And that once is when she's giving birth, if she chooses to be a biological mother. And another is when she's going through menopause and she's giving birth to her wise woman self, her crone. And it's a fruit of everything that's been lived until then. So, yeah.
I would say
Okay.
one more
Yeah.
thing here in relation to menopause, because like you, when I realized that I'm not going to bleed forever, and because I was already offering my blood to the earth, I was collecting it, I thought I would like to collect some of the blood to stay with me when I no longer bleed. So I want to offer that as an inspiration for women in their years of approaching menopause, that you can collect your blood through a cup and preserve it. I preserved mine in lavender. Lavender is an antibacterial, lavender essential oil. And women always ask me, well, how much lavender you put? So I emptied my moon cup into a jar, and I started with 9 drops of essential oil, lavender essential oil. And then I kept decanting my moon cup into the jar, and I would smell it. If it still smelled of lavender, that was enough. If it didn't smell of lavender anymore, then I added a few drops. I have not bled now for 7 years. And my blood in the jar, which I've done a lot of ceremony with, is still potent and lavendery and alive and never been in the fridge. So offering that.
Wow, this one I haven't heard. I have heard of making a tincture with
Yes,
alcohol.
yes.
So I do that so I can travel with my blood and I can offer it at different times, even if I'm not bleeding at that time. But this essential oil version, oh goodness, this is exciting. Oh, the witch in me is like, woohoo. Yeah, yeah, okay. This is, and I know that another way of preserving blood is drying it. I personally have never dried my blood, but I know of other sisters who do, and we are going to do a video on that, on how to dry the blood. And so you can, you know, if you're still bleeding, preserve it in dried and keep it, and
Yes,
then you can water it down or offer it as dried pieces as you
yes,
wish. And so that's also, yes, there are ways. This is yes, golden for those who are perimenopausal or approaching that stage to think ahead and that they may want to do
yes,
that. Great,
yeah,
thank you. Yes, great offering. Thank you so much. Um,
yes,
I'd like to, the last question I have is about spirit and matter, and how is that represented? Because I know for you, you do understand this, our menstrual blood as a spiritual, um, that has a spiritual component. And so what, if you could expand on that in the way that you have lived it, or the way you see it, or the way you perceive it. And the second part of that question is, and how is that um, in the times that we're living now, especially right now with all the shadows and mud and stuff that's coming up, a lot of fears and a lot of pain and hate and all kinds of things that we're facing. And that how is this part of the guidance, or part of the
mm,
way forward in a different paradigm, in a different type of world? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I started touching on it by saying the indigenous wisdom of the blood as being a time when the veil between the worlds is thin. So I would say that we have access to spirit in a heightened, potent way when we bleed. It's a doorway that opens, it's a gateway that opens. So when we live in the cultures that we all live in, that encourage us to run and do and never stop, it's impossible to access spirit wisdom, inner guidance, when you cook meals for your children and do laundry and work full time and keep house and be a partner. No way. We have to be quiet. The gateway to spirit is not enough for it to open. We have to meet it with quietude, with taking time, with going inward, with relinquishing our chores and our duties, and having our surroundings supporting us, the people in our lives, like in the tribes, the men and the older women and the older children took care of women's chores when they were in their cocoon, in their moon lodges and red tents. So when we create that kind of an environment, and we don't have to wait for the whole culture to change, we can create those environments in our homes. When we allow ourselves to go inward, to close the door, to meet the open door of spirit with a quietude and inquiry and quest within ourselves, then we can delve in. Then we can bring inspiration. In indigenous cultures, the women in the moon lodges were all sleeping around the altar while they were bleeding in the moon lodge in the red tent, with their heads around the altar and their bodies out like the spokes of the wheel. And they were dreaming prophecies for the tribes. And people came with questions about personal decisions and directions in their own lives, or the elders with questions about whether to migrate now or later, whether to wage peace with this other tribe or go to war. And the women would access dreamtime wisdom during their blood to receive answers that are not cerebral, that are from the spirit world. So my invitation to women is to realize that this door opens for you every month, and to create the atmosphere, the climate, the circumstances monthly where you can meet this wisdom and inquire into it and ask for it and delve into it, because it's there for you.
Just as you were speaking, tears again are coming to me, that it's just yeah, coming back to balance.
Yeah.
That's the world I want to live in, which is why I'm doing this project. And I know that we're not that far. It's close. It's
We are
close.
getting closer every moment, every day.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, thank you. And I happen to be bleeding today. It came early. My bleed came early, and so it was supposed to come on Tuesday. I wouldn't have not have scheduled our interview otherwise,
Right.
but it came, and yeah, so I'm feeling quite tender and emotional a bit, and so it's been such a beautiful experience to do this, to have this conversation and this transmission from you while also bleeding, and like I feel like it's just sinking deep into my cellular memory or in my muscles, like it's just landing in a way that perhaps if I wasn't bleeding right now I wouldn't be as
Mm,
open to that seeping in like sponge.
yeah. Yeah. It's beautiful to feel your passion and your openness and your receptivity, and to see how you are taking the torch and opening the gates for so many women. So thank you for that.
So we will for sure have your books listed there, and you already submitted one of the blogs that you wrote about the red tents. It's already up on the website in the writings section, and this interview will go up in the Wisdom Keepers of Our Sacred Blood series. Is so grateful for everything you're pouring through and making available to so many of us in different places of the world that we'll have access to, thanks to everything you've walked, talked, breathed, and labored for 3 decades. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Mm, my pleasure. And it really is a calling which I have, it's a path that I've walked for all of us and continue to walk for us all. And for our daughters, you know, the girls that grow up today, they are tomorrow's leaders. The girls that are now being raised around the world. They are our future, and their reality would be different than ours, for sure.
Yes, yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes, it will, and yes, it is.
Yes.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.